This week, the internet went totally crazy for somebody called Bean Dad. This controversial moment in Twitter history is something that we have all been talking about for a few days online, and I thought it would make a really great way for me to explain something to you. Today we are going to talk about Bean Dad, some of the mistakes that he made, and various types of childhood trauma. But this is what I'm calling small T trauma, so it's not like the big stuff that you usually think of, but this is still stuff that can have an effect on you and later in life. So if you are interested in learning more about small T trauma and learning more about Bean Dad, then you're going to want to keep watching. Hello, my dear conscious creators. Welcome back. My name is Jen. I am a spiritual life and business coach, and this is my YouTube channel. I'd love to welcome you here today, whether this is your first time or your millionth time. This channel is where I create a brand new training for you every single week, all about the art of up-leveling your life through mindset and manifestation. So if you are into transforming your world, setting goals and surpassing them, and doing that all in a really spiritual aligned way, then you're going to want to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So as I said at the top of the video, today we are talking about Bean Dad, not exclusively Bean Dad, though I am not going to do this as a play-by-play. I'm not even going to post the tweets. They've already been taken down. There's already been an apology issued, but I am going to give you an overview of the situation and give you my thoughts on it, and then go take this stuff into learning a little bit more about childhood trauma. And like I said at the beginning, I'm talking here about small T trauma, what I call small T trauma. So this is sort of everyday trauma, the kind of trauma we have all experienced, but I'm really doing this as a way to kind of open up the dialogue between parents and their children, and as well as for us to go back in our childhood and look for these situations, because we all think that because our childhood was good, that there's nothing that we need to fix, and that actually isn't true. Many of us have these issues that came from moments like Bean Dad and can come back later on in life and haunt us in all kinds of different ways. But the more that we ignore that and pretend everything is fine, the less awareness we have. And of course, if we don't have any awareness, then we can never heal these things, and they're going to keep perpetuating themselves over and over in our life. So I'm not doing this video again to call out Bean Dad. I think he has been called out plenty, and like I said, he's already issued an apology, but I thought that the way that this came up online, the way that he presented this and the things that he did would just make a really great way of talking about this very complicated topic. Okay, so the Bean Dad story, if you guys aren't on Twitter, this is where it all began, of course. That is where most of the internet drama these days comes from. But basically, this person was online and he made a very long thread outlining something that happened in his day. So basically, the gist of it is this dad was at home with his child, and his child was hungry. And the child came up to the dad and was like, "Dad, I'm hungry." And the dad's like, "Well, I'm not going to cook for you right now, but you can go open yourself a can of beans and warm them up and eat them." And that's, of course, anybody sees that, listens to that, and knows that that's like totally fine. But what happens next is where it all kind of falls apart. And in this Twitter thread, basically, the child comes to the dad with the can of beans and is like, "Dad, I don't know how to open these." And the dad is like, "Oh my God, you don't know how to use a can opener? I am going to use this as a teaching moment." Which again, that in itself doesn't sound like a terrible thing. But what goes on to transpire as he live tweets it is 6 hours of him denying his child eating. He doesn't let the child have the beans until she figures out how to use the can opener herself. And he doesn't tell her how to do it. He just kind of waits for her to do it. And so, of course, when I read this, I was horrified. I can only kind of laugh about this now because, like I said, this man has come back online and explained a little bit more in depth, given an apology, owned his sort of side of this. But for me, reading this, it was really, really terrible. And obviously it was a really terrible thing to read for a lot of other people, because what this looks like from the outside and the way he was choosing to present this on Twitter is that his child was hungry, asking him for help, and he was not helping her directly. He was trying to get her to figure something out and leaving her hungry in the process, which I think we can all agree is perhaps not the best way to teach your child. The Socratic method in childhood rearing when it comes to your child actually being hungry is probably not the way to go. Of course, it is great to teach your child independence, and of course, it is great to give them the skills that they can learn to figure out puzzles themselves. Like, those things are great. Those alone are amazing. But him tying this to this food that this child can't get for 6 hours and live tweeting about it as he goes, that just adds on a whole bunch of ickiness and a whole bunch of stuff that I want to talk about today. So of course, when this blew up online, this person was inundated with people accusing him of child abuse. And of course, he was very offended and very defensive at first. And of course, was saying things like, of course, I'm not abusing my child. Of course, like, I'm just being a good parent, etc., etc. So you can really see how that there is a disconnect in this person's mind about, you know, what was happening with the child and the things that he was doing with the child. Well, or I should say, the way he was presenting what was happening with the child to Twitter and his self-image. So I'm going to just say this as a beginning, a kind of an aside from the whole thing that I actually want to talk about today. But it's kind of interesting if you look at the original Twitter thread. Like, he originally understands that his child does not know how to use a can opener, and then immediately goes into, what a terrible dad I've been, and then I'm going to teach you how to use one. So it's like he's having a very abrupt ego reaction. He's like, my parenting is being questioned, but I'm going to respond to that by using this as an amazing teaching moment. But in doing so, I think kind of overshot the boat. You can just choose to teach your child how to use a can opener without turning it into this big, excessively long, in my opinion, drawn out scenario during which your child is hungry. So that's an interesting thing to note about humans in general. Usually when our ego is threatened, we will go out of our way to make us feel secure. And what basically happened with Bean Dad was he realized that he had not taught his child how to use a can opener. So he did not want to question his good parenting ego-based identity. So he immediately wanted to rectify the situation. And like I said, a very overbearing, overhanded fashion, in my opinion. That is just an interesting thing to look at when you can see it happening outside of you. When you are reacting to something in your world because it is affecting your identity, trust me, it is a lot more difficult to see how this plays out. But this is just a really good thing to be aware of in terms of human behavior in general. When you can start to see this in other people, then it becomes a lot easier to notice it in yourself. And again, this isn't to specifically call out Bean Dad for this, although I definitely think he did some things wrong. This is just something so we can all kind of learn from that moment. Okay, so then the internet goes wild. Bean Dad is called out for abusing his child. And of course, that is where the kind of debate comes from, and that is where I wanted to talk about things today. So I can see it from both sides. I am not advocating for his behavior at all, but I can see why he would think that his behavior was not abusive. Meanwhile, people like me can see why that would be. So in my opinion, again, I'm not trying to be like, I know the best, I know everything about the situation. Again, I think this is a really interesting thing to talk about because it became such a big public moment. From my perspective, this child came to their parent figure with a bodily function, a physical need that they needed to be addressed. And that is, like, you know, the basic requirements of a parent. Keeping your child fed, keeping your child clothed, and keeping a roof over their head. That is like basic minimum parenting. I think we can all agree on that. So your child coming to you and saying that they're hungry, that already is a pretty, like, I think that's a big thing that you need to pay attention to. You can't just be like, well, I don't feel like feeding you right now. It's inconvenient for me. That would make you a terrible parent. So he already has this major need in his child that is being brought to his attention. But instead of addressing that need first and foremost, he decides to go off and do something else in parenting, which is ostensibly to teach this child how to figure things out and to trust themselves to figure things out in a very long 6-hour drawn out scenario. So what this moment is showing me, and this is the reason why I wanted to talk about it today, this is why, again, so many of us have issues from our childhood, which I would classify as trauma. Again, small t trauma. This is stuff that was very traumatic to us at the time, that may not have happened because our parent was trying to hurt us or trying to avoid meeting our needs or trying to do any of these things. Like, this bean dad really thought he was doing the best that he could for his child at that time. And he kind of missed the boat, in my opinion. But he felt his heart was in the right place. He felt like he was doing a good job. He felt like this was him being a great parent. And that is the thing that we also need to recognize in our own family dynamics, is a lot of the times when our parents have inflicted this trauma onto us, it isn't because they were evil people. It isn't because they were trying to torture us. It isn't because we were not worthy of what we were asking for. It is just because that person thought they were doing the right thing. And that is the thing for everybody in this world. We all think we're doing the right thing at all times. And we are not necessarily doing the right thing at all times, but we want to have that benefit of the doubt for ourselves, and we don't always give that to other people. So that is another important point to make as I talk about all of this trauma stuff. Let's go back to the SmallT trauma stuff and think about this now from the child's perspective, which is automatically where my mind went. So we already talked about this. The child comes to you with a basic need. Dad, I am hungry. That is a need that was not met for 6 more hours. So that is my estimation, a big problem and a potentially traumatic situation that this person could learn from in all kinds of different ways. There is also the secondary thing of, I am going to my parent, my caregiver, I am asking them to help me solve a problem, and they are not helping me. That could completely turn into a feeling of, it is not safe for me to ask for help. It is not safe for me to ask my parents for help. It is not safe for me to admit I need help. It is not safe for me to admit that there is something I need help with. Like, this one little incident could be interpreted and rewired into the mind as a limiting belief that we'll carry with us for years and years just from this one situation. The other factor that I thought of when I was thinking about this child in this situation is, like, I remember when I was a kid, and granted that was a long time ago, so I was probably learning one of those old timey metal can openers, but I remember struggling with those things the first few times I opened them. Like, my little hands just did not have the strength and the manual dexterity as an adult hand. And we have to remember that our kids are not little mini adults. They do not come with the same strength and the same physical knowledge that we do. And we forget that there was a point in time that we did not know how to use this thing. So it is really unfair for us to assume that our child should just know this without us teaching them. That's actually a huge thing. But it is also unfair for us to think that they have the same manual dexterity and the same intuitive understanding of something that we have. Bean Dad, to make matters worse in this Twitter scenario, which of course he later recanted and said he was playing it up and he's playing this like character online of being a terrible dad. He was sort of mocking his child as this whole thing went along. He said that his child was unable to intuit it, which, I mean, obviously I would find that very shocking if you would just give a child a can and a can opener and let them to it if they could just figure it out on their own. But that's not just can openers, that's the same thing with anything else. If math class in school was just us being locked in a room with a math problem and no one teaching us how to get through it, I can pretty much guarantee we would have all failed math. Like, we need someone to actually show us how to do things. We can't just figure things out all the time ourselves. That is just not the proper way of teaching children. The other layer, though, on top of all of this that I really wanted to talk about, though, is the fact that he is putting this on Twitter in the first place. He is outlining what is happening with his child in an extremely public way. He was talking multiple times about how she was crying, talking multiple times about how she was unable to intuit it. Like, that's a defect in her. And I found the whole thing about putting this online and like basically live tweeting your parenting moment to be so extremely distasteful. This is something we collectively need to talk about, because I know when people have kids, they just, automatically start talking about them online, posting pictures of them, bringing them into their online worlds, but there really isn't a layer of consent about that. And, of course, when your child is 2, the 2-year-old cannot consent to that, but at some point in time, your child is going to be an adult. And as we all know, Everything lives on the internet for forever. So being dad's daughter is one day going to go for a job interview somewhere, and perhaps her boss is going to figure out that she was the daughter in this situation. And that is something that is really not cool, in my opinion. That is not something that we should be doing. And the way I kind of want to gauge this, and the way I want people to maybe challenge themselves to think about this, is like most of us would not go air our dirty laundry in terms of our romantic relationships online. Like if you were having an argument with a partner and you were live tweeting it, you probably wouldn't be going through it line by line saying this happened, that happened, this person cried, I said this, blah, blah, blah. You probably would not do that because that probably would not work for that other person. Maybe there's somebody out there who's in a relationship where they like to do this kind of thing, but I think that is pretty rare, especially without somebody's permission. But that is basically what this person is doing with their child. Their child is having this moment where they're hungry, they're upset, they're trying to figure something out, and it's taking them a really long time. And instead of that just happening and the awfulness of that happening all by itself, that is now magnified times a million by being put online. So I'm not saying that this is definitely going to happen to this poor daughter, but these are the things that could have come from this one interaction. I learned that my needs are not important. I learned that I should ignore my hunger. I learned that I should not ask for help. I should learn that it is not safe to go to my parents for help. I learned that my privacy doesn't matter and it can be violated. I learned that me having an emotional reaction like crying is something to be mocked, so I should therefore learn how to lock my emotions up. I learned that being a child and not knowing everything is not safe, and that I should just try to hide my childlike nature from the world and be more of an adult, even though this kid was 9, I think. So those are just some things to think about. And so again, I'm using this being dad as a teaching example of my own, because again, being dad did not think that he was being a bad person. Being dad really thought his heart was in the right place. But if you can back up and look at it from the things that I just gave you, you can see how this one moment can turn into so much more. I'm not here again to call him out. I'm not even going to put his actual name here. But what I'm wanting to bring up in this training today is that I want you to start to think now about moments in your childhood that might have caused you this kind of trauma. So there are 3 things that really wire things into our subconscious mind. One is the things that we learn when we are young. So anything before the age of 7 basically goes directly into our subconscious mind without us having a conscious filter on it. Number 2, things that are repeated. So if your parent was telling you the same thing, the same negative thing about yourself over and over again, that would be hardwired into your mind out of repetition. But number 3 is the emotional reaction. So if you are having an emotional reaction to a situation, say your dad not beating you for 6 hours while he waits for you to figure out how to use a can opener, that intense emotional reaction is probably going to be hardwired in your subconscious mind. And there's probably going to be a limiting belief and a shame story that are attached to that moment. So I challenge you right now to think about being dad. You are feel free to come to your own conclusions about what should or should not have happened in this parenting situation. But I challenge you to think about this and apply this lesson to your own life. I challenge you to think back to your childhood and think about these moments that were, not moments that your parents meant to be torturous or meant to fill you with shame, but that had some sort of reaction in you. And what lessons did you get from that? What did you learn about that moment? Did you learn that it wasn't safe for you to share your emotions? Did you learn that it wasn't safe for you to ask for help? Did you learn that it wasn't safe for you to ask your parents for help? These are all things that can come back and can create limiting beliefs, negative repeating patterns in us as an adult. And again, awareness is the first key. When I talk about the SmallT trauma stuff, it is pretty triggering for people, not because I'm trying to traumatize people, but because people are very reluctant in using that word when it applies to them because they had a quote unquote good childhood. So what I'm trying to do is not to try to call out a bunch of people as horrible parents. This is more coming from this place of we are all imperfect people. Most of our parents did not, go to a parenting class or read parenting books, much less have any idea how to do this. And even if they do, that does not mean that they're going to be perfect. There are no perfect people and there are no perfect parents. So there was a moment in every single child's childhood, which is like the bean dad moment, where we really wanted something or really needed help, or really, something happened and they humiliated us, maybe, whatever the case might be. That moment, even though in your mind, your logical adult mind is like, oh, my mom didn't mean that. Oh, my dad didn't mean that. Oh, they were just doing their best. They were just, trying their hardest, whatever the moment was at the time. We write it off because of their intent. But understanding that intent and understanding that they were doing their best does not make the feelings inside of you go away. It does not undo the limiting beliefs that you learned at that time. Those things will stay with you until you do this work of going into your subconscious mind, doing some reparenting work, looking for a limiting belief and recoding it to be what you want to believe. All of these are things that we have the option to do as an adult. And if you are a conscious creator and you are consciously creating and manifesting your reality, then I suggest that you make this part of your regular routine. What I really want you to just take away from this video, I do not want you to go call out Bean Dad. I think Bean Dad has learned his lessons, but I do want you to think about how these little moments that were not meant to be hurtful, that were not meant to be traumatic, can actually stay with us for a long time and teach us all kinds of things about ourselves and about the world and about our family and about our potential that aren't actually true. It is up to every single one of us to take back control, to go in and do the healing work that we need to in order to become the person that we really want to be. So I hope this video today inspires you to start this healing journey in your own world. Again, I am doing this always with only love in my heart. I'm not calling people out. I'm not trying to get you to be angry at your parents. I'm only doing this to help you understand yourself better and to give yourself this gift of healing. Okay, so on that note, thank you so much for watching this training today. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you want to learn more about me, you can come on over to my website. I have a free manifestation planner over there. You can sign up for updates and I will send you that right away. I am also about to launch my brand new monthly membership program, and I'm so excited to be sharing that with you. So keep an eye out, because Recode, I'm not sure if it'll be out by the time this video is out, but if it's not, it will be out very soon. And that is going to be where I'm going to help you do this healing work in a monthly container, which is really exciting. So other than that, thank you again so much for being here, and I'll be back in next week's training. So until then, happy manifesting, my friends, and please go do this healing work. It is so, so, so important. Love you guys.